is going to be terrific in terms of recruitment, in terms of morale, in terms of returning America to a fighting force, which is what the American people really want.
Is someone with Pete Hegseth's alleged history really the kind of person we want at the helm?
Our alliances are stronger than they've been in decades. NATO is more capable than it's ever been.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, facing scrutiny, President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks head to Capitol Hill as confirmation hearings get underway tomorrow. This week, we'll see his picks to lead defense, justice, homeland security, and the State Department.
We are now at a pivotal point in the negotiations for a hostage deal and ceasefire in Gaza.
And we're also tracking renewed hope for a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. What the White House and Jake Sullivan, what they're saying about a stop to the fighting and the release of the October 7th hostages. Plus, California bracing for dangerous winds to return pretty soon. The death toll rising, and politics could come into play as the wildfires continue to ravage Los Angeles and beyond. But we start with politics with Caitlin Huey-Burns at the White House and Nancy Cordes in West Palm Beach, Florida. Great to see both of you. Appreciate all of your hard work and reporting. As we begin this week, Nancy, let's start with you. Confirmation hearings begin tomorrow. What's your outlook? What's in your notebook?
Well, I think that the most contentious confirmation hearing, and there are set to be a dozen of them over the next few days, is certainly going to be Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. Not only is this one of the most pivotal roles in any presidential cabinet, but Hegseth has had a very rocky road. It's been a little quiet lately, but that doesn't mean that Democrats aren't going to absolutely pile on the questions about allegations of sexual misconduct, allegations of fiscal mismanagement at a pair of veterans charities that he was let go from. And they are already making it very clear that they plan to pepper him with questions. They're also pushing for access to the FBI's background check of Hegseth. They want to see if the former Fox News host and veteran is accused of anything else that they don't know about. So far, only the chair and the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee have actually been briefed on what's in that background check. You would assume that that information would then be filtered to other members on the committee. But Democrats say this is such a pivotal role and such a controversial nominee that they want more access to the information themselves.
And Caitlin, you have been closely following President-elect Trump. There is this looming question about whether those who participated in January 6th in various capacities might be able to receive pardons from Trump once he becomes president again. Let's listen to what J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, had to say on Fox News.
If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly.
So, Caitlin, does the vice president-elect speak for the entire Trump team and how this is going to play out?
You know, Bob, that is an outstanding question as we're a week away from Trump's first day in office, which he has said he will issue pardons for January 6th rioters on the day, within minutes, he said, of being sworn in as president. And it was notable in that clip there that you played from the vice president-elect because he's being more descriptive of what kind of pardons they're considering here. Trump has promised pardons with the first day of his office, but just last week at Mar-a-Lago at a press conference, I asked the president-elect, are you planning to issue pardons for those who are accused of violent offenses? You know, those accused of assaulting police officers, for instance. Remember, there are nearly 1,700 defendants here, and a portion of those have been charged with violent crimes. And last week, the president-elect Trump said that he wouldn't rule that out, and he said that he was considering big pardons, that they were coming. So in that clip, at least for Vance, that is him kind of laying down a marker of sorts, saying that for nonviolent offenses, there won't be pardons. But again, he mentioned that gray area, and that's kind of where we're looking at in terms of these pardons coming. But this was a big promise that Trump made on the campaign trail repeatedly, and something his supporters, at least, want to see. The big question is kind of how the larger public reacts.
This is a big week, Nancy, for President Biden, his final week in office. He has been delivering remarks both privately and publicly. On Wednesday, he will address the nation, I believe, from the Oval Office. That will be a major moment as he ends his presidency. But today he gave a speech about his record on foreign policy. Let's hear a bit of that.
Compared to 4 years ago, America is stronger. Our alliances are stronger. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. We have not gone to war to make these things happen.
Nancy, what's your assessment of President Biden's speech today and how he talks about foreign policy when he looks at the scope of his administration's record?
Right. Well, his role as diplomat-in-chief, Bob, as you know, has always been very important to him. He is steeped in foreign policy, and he really came into office believing that he could not only strengthen current U.S. alliances, but forge new ones, particularly in Asia, where he has worked very hard to contain China's rise. He certainly has worked to strengthen NATO, worked to create an enduring coalition to support Ukraine. On the other hand, there are some major items on the to-do list that did not get checked off. The war in Ukraine, of course, is still raging. He will leave office without having helped to bring that to any kind of satisfying close. And there is still this open question about hostages. The Biden administration has been negotiating with Hamas, with Israel, with the Qataris for months now. Today, we heard from Jake Sullivan, the president's national security advisor, who said there has been progress. He's now hopeful that there could be a deal struck to return some of those hostages as early as next week. But we have heard that before, Bob, and only to see a potential deal stymied. And so that is something that President Biden would very much like to see happen before he leaves office, but he is now leaving office in just 7 days.
Caitlin, you're at the White House, but you've been down in Palm Beach covering President-elect Trump. Let's bring on the screen some of his cabinet nominees, those who face hearings. Pete Hegseth for defense, Pam Bondi for attorney general. You have Marco Rubio. They're widely expected to be confirmed as Secretary of State. Kristi Noem for Department of Homeland Security. Scott Bessent for the Treasury Department. So these are all just ahead on the horizon. What are you hearing from your Trump sources about who has a smooth path and who might not?
Yeah, there is a sense among the Trump campaign, or the Trump team, I should say now. Sorry, I'm used to calling it the campaign. Among the Trump team, that most of these nominees, if not all, are likely to get confirmed. There is a feeling, especially what we've seen with Pete Hegseth. Remember, just a month ago, there were questions about whether he would even make it through to the confirmation process. And you really saw this kind of rise among the base in support of Hegseth and the nominees. And you're seeing this pressure really applied to Republican senators. Remember, last month, the president-elect said that he may not be opposed to primary challenges for those who oppose his nominees if they're done, in his words, for political reasons. So you're seeing that pressure applied here. But it's also notable, Bob, as you know, even though Republicans will have a majority in the Senate, it is still not a huge majority. And there are still a couple of more moderate-leaning Republicans like a Susan Collins or a Lisa Murkowski or others who aren't necessarily, under that same kind of pressure from the base, just given the dynamic in their state. So looking at those lawmakers in particular, but we're also looking across the aisle to see what Democrats may come over and support some of these nominees, like RFK Jr. for HHS, Health and Human Services. There could be a Democrat or two who supports him. He's a former Democrat. We'll see. Tulsi Gabbard also is a big wild card here because she, of course, also is a former Democrat. So we'll see, what if there are any allegiances there. I don't think there are among Democrats, but also any Republicans who may feel uneasy about. But the significant thing here is that this is happening quickly and that the public is going to hear from these nominees and hear this vigorous line of questioning from senators whose job it is to essentially vet for the public, provide that consent, obviously a part of their duty.
Advise and consent, as they say, and as they like to do on Capitol Hill. Caitlin Huey-Burns, Nancy Cordes, thank you.
Today is day 7. These fires started last Tuesday, and it's been relentless.
The LA County Fire Chief says despite making some progress over the weekend, firefighters are preparing for the return of dangerous winds. The latest on those devastating fires coming up next on America Decides. At least 24 people have been killed so far in the Southern California wildfires. 92,000 residents of Los Angeles County are under evacuation orders. Officials are warning the public about the winds over the next few days that the National Weather Service is calling, quote, particularly dangerous. For more, let's bring in Adam Yamaguchi from Pacific Palisades, California. Adam, thanks for being here. What a tragic story. Walk us through what you're seeing and hearing on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. You can probably get a pretty good picture behind me. There's just devastation everywhere, every direction you look. We're standing at the top of a bluff here and just looking down. Really, only until I look past off in the horizon that I can see intact structures in place. But everywhere we are here, you really only see chimneys. That's the only remnant of what used to be homes for so many people here. Fire crews are on site. They're doing site surveys to ensure that there are no hot spots. You've got gas company officials as well as the Department of Power and Water officials who are out on the ground assessing, let's say, down power lines, which are plenty around here. They're trying to make sure that there are no other live wires or gas lines that are open that could potentially fuel yet another round of these fires where we are here.
Officials, as you know, keep warning now about dangerous winds expected to start early tomorrow. What are you hearing about their top concerns?
Yeah, obviously the top concern is the unpredictability and the ferociousness of these winds. Firefighters were able to make some progress this weekend in building containment lines around the perimeter of these active fires. They had a couple days of a reprieve. Winds came down. But as you mentioned, the Santa Ana winds are set to kick off again later this afternoon. And the National Weather Service has issued the highest level red flag alert. That's the particularly dangerous situation alert, which is set to start overnight here and go into the next day, the next evening. So fire officials are pre-positioning all of their assets and personnel in places that may see potential spark-ups or see fires jump. So that is foremost in their minds right now. It's all about the wind here.
All about the wind. Adam Yamaguchi, always appreciate your reporting from the field. Thank you very much. Now we turn to Maeve Reston, our friend who covers West Coast politics for the Washington Post. Maeve, great to see you. You've covered national politics and California for a long time. You know California well. Former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, has called on Governor Gavin Newsom to resign. And Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has received heavy criticism for her handling of the wildfires. What's your latest reporting on both the mayor and the governor as the winds start to pick up and this crisis continues?
Well, we've seen these flashpoints between President-elect Trump and Gavin Newsom going all the way back to 2016. They have been rivals all the way along. And now Governor Newsom is in this very difficult situation where the new administration is about to take over in a matter of days. And Los Angeles is in complete crisis on the campaign trail. As you know, Trump threatened to withhold funding for things like wildfires. And so at this moment, Governor Newsom is trying to strike this balance between inviting Trump to come survey the wildfire damage, praising President Biden for making an immediate emergency declaration and offering, federal reimbursement for everything that's being spent. But this is a very tense situation. And as Governor Newsom goes out to the fire lines and as he's, walking through the rubble, he also is almost like fact-checking President-elect Trump and much of the alt-right on social media in real time, trying to push back against some of these myths or falsehoods that have come up about California's management of the fires and how things are going here. You mentioned Mayor Karen Bass. She had, she's been really shouldering a lot of the criticism because she was actually in Ghana on a presidential delegation at the request of President Biden at the time that these fires took off, even though there had been warnings about these hurricane force winds that were coming. So she was actually gone when the fires started. She rushed back, and including on a military aircraft. But she has been taking a ton of criticism on all of that. And, she's up for re-election in 2026. Gavin Newsom is obviously thinking about running for president as soon as 2028. So how they manage these crises and how the public perception of them is shaped is really going to be important in determining their futures.
Maeve, let's listen to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance talking about leaders in California.
There is a serious lack of competent governance in California, and I think it's part of the reason why these fires have gotten so bad. We need to do a better job at both the state and federal level.
Maeve, some pretty tough criticism from Senator Vance, now the Vice President-elect. What is this tension between Governor Newsom and the Trump-Vance administration as it begins next week a signal, perhaps, about what's to come with the rebuilding effort, the federal effort, as this all plays out?
Well, I think, the amount of federal funding that is available to help with this disaster is really a big question here. President Biden only has control over funds that go out, for a certain amount of time. President Trump and Vance could revisit that. This has been, as you well know, been a constant theme on the campaign trail that, big blue states or Democratic cities with Democratic mayors aren't managing them correctly, or that they're not tough enough on criminals, things like that. And so you're seeing that divide and those criticisms be applied to this crisis. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Governor Newsom, for example, navigates that. He keeps saying that it's an open hand, not a closed fist to President-elect Trump. But Trump is really, they had a good relationship initially during the pandemic, but President-elect Trump has really rebuffed any overtures from Newsom at this point. And, there may be a lot of rebuilding dollars on the line when it comes to how they can repair that relationship and, how generous President-elect Trump wants to be with those funds. So there's a lot on the line here for a lot of people in California.
And Maeve, just quickly as we finish here, I love Los Angeles. I've been there many times in my life. What's it like to be in that area on the ground amid all of the carnage and the fire?
Well, it's just devastating being out on the fire line. And, we had all these water issues here. So you would watch like one house just ignite after another, and there would be firefighters standing in the street, and they didn't have the water resources or the manpower to fight each one of them. And then at the same time, you've got 150,000 people under some kind of evacuation warning or order. And the rest of us are, living pretty close to those lines and hearing these alerts go off on our phone all the time. So I think there is this fatigue that has settled in for everyone here, that it's just kind of mentally exhausting, wondering like how close the flames will get to your kids' school, whether to send them to school, whether it's safe for them to go outside and breathe the air. So it really is a really difficult time for everyone out here.
I know almost everybody out there has a connection to the disaster in some way. Just heartbreaking to see. Maeve Reston, appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
President-elect Trump's cabinet hearings, they start tomorrow. First up, Pete Hegseth. We've got more on the defense secretary nominee after the break. You're watching America Decides. President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is now not facing a confirmation hearing this week. Senator John Barrasso says a, quote, paperwork problem is holding that up. Or Scott McFarland asked her about that today.
Any concerns if your hearings aren't on the calendar yet?
I'm working closely with Senator Cotton.
Do you have an estimate as to when it might be on the calendar?
Senator Cotton can answer that.
Are you confident that you have enough votes to be confirmed?
Senator Cotton can answer that. I'm focused on continuing to meet with senators as we continue to go through this process.
You're confident it's going to be scheduled eventually?
Yes.
A muted response from Tulsi Gabbard, the former lawmaker and now nominee for the Trump cabinet at DNI. Scott, great to see you. What's your read on where her nomination stands?
Because it's not on the calendar, it's in this limbo that may not be comfortable for Tulsi Gabbard, because Republicans have yet to put this thing on the schedule. That leaves time, and time is your enemy if you're a nominee for high office, because the unpredictable, the unexpected can happen. But what's more, Bob, because they've jam-packed so many confirmation hearings into the next 72 hours, about a dozen of them, that leaves such little bandwidth for Democrats to mobilize or galvanize against any one of Trump's nominees. If Tulsi Gabbard gets pushed back to later this month or into February, then there's more time and space available to Democrats to try to marshal opposition from some Republicans against her. I think for Gabbard's supporters, they'd like this to get on the calendar and get on the calendar soon.
Scott, you've done a lot of reporting on the FBI, the DOJ, and what that all could mean once President-elect Trump takes office next week. Let's listen to what Chris Wray, the outgoing FBI director, had to say on 60 Minutes last night.
The president-elect had made clear that he intended to make a change, and the law is that that is something he's able to do for any reason or no reason at all. My conclusion was that the thing that was best for the Bureau was to try to do this in an orderly way, to not thrust the FBI deeper into the fray.
Scott, you are well-sourced, not just on Capitol Hill or on the campaign trail, but inside the Justice Department and the legal world. What are your sources telling you? Do they have any apprehension about the Wray interview on 60 Minutes and what it says about the coming month or two once Trump takes office?
Pretty impactful week for Christopher Wray. I was there Friday at the Department of Justice at the FBI headquarters when they had a 3-hour send-off, goodbye internally to Chris Wray, with speakers from the Attorney General to other key law enforcement officers across the country, lauding Wray for his service to the country, recognizing it's the end of this chapter. What comes next is a bit of a mystery, because the would-be successor to Chris Wray, Kash Patel, also does not have a confirmation hearing scheduled, and there's going to be any number of Democratic efforts to try to slow or derail that nomination. So for those inside the Department of Justice, there's the unknown. What does come next? Here's a more fundamental issue, Bob. We know the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history, led by the FBI, is the U.S. Capitol riot prosecutions, and there is no clarity whatsoever whether the FBI will be permitted to continue those investigations after next Monday, after the inauguration. We know from our reporting at CBS News there are others the FBI is still trying to chase down and arrest for their roles 4 years ago. It's just far from clear, Bob, whether they'll be permitted to do so.
And Scott, finally and quickly, Jack Smith, the special counsel, are we going to see his full report or not in the coming days?
If it happens, it won't happen until 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. If it happens, a court has slowed down this process. A judge in Florida, Bob, allowed this to be publicly released, but Trump and his former co-defendants in Florida could appeal again and slow it down further.
Scott McFarland, thank you. President-elect Donald Trump in Greenland, the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance says there could be a deal that could be made. So what's the plan? If so, you're watching America Decides. As you know, some in Washington have expressed concern over President-elect Donald Trump's proposal to exert more influence over Greenland. Others have been supportive. One of them is Vice President-elect J.D. Vance.
I think there actually is a real opportunity here for us to take leadership to protect America's security.
Let's bring in our political reporter panel, Graham Slattery and Daniela Diaz. Graham is a national political reporter for Reuters. Daniela is a congressional reporter for Politico. Daniela, let's begin with you. Is the former president, now president-elect, serious about acquiring Greenland?
You know, we've heard a lot from President-elect Donald Trump on Greenland, on Canada, on reclaiming the Panama Canal, but it does seem that Greenland, the plan to try to purchase Greenland, continues to be something that he has been interested in even since his first term, and that he's taking incredibly seriously. Of course, the Prime Minister of Greenland also saying that they're open to having this discussion with President-elect Donald Trump. But the real bigger picture here being he sees it as a good opportunity for national security, for its resources. Already we're seeing House Republicans put forward legislation to help him with that goal of acquiring Greenland. So it does seem to be a very serious request that he's repeatedly discussing.
And Graham, you and your colleagues at Reuters wrote a report on this entire issue. Let me read from you one sentence. One person briefed on internal discussions with Trump told Reuters that the former real estate developer is unlikely to use military force to gain control over Greenland. One person briefed. Is there a full sense of confidence inside Trump's inner circle that Trump would not use military force? And is it being discussed in any way?
Not to my knowledge, no. But there's, of course, other forms of coercion that you can employ when you're a country the size of the United States, when you're going up against a foe like Denmark, obviously a relatively small country. You know, you can really throw your weight around in an economic sense, be it via trade, tariffs, diplomacy, that add up to coercion, even if maybe you don't have gunships in the North Atlantic.
Well, what do they want? What does the Trump team want out of Greenland? Should they ever get some kind of control over it in any way?
Well, so the rationale is that it has a strategic purpose in terms of rare earth minerals, shipping routes, et cetera. However, in practice, what people around Trump have told me and my colleagues is that Trump personally is quite interested in the idea of acquiring Greenland as a means of cementing his legacy. You know, it's quite rare for the U.S. to expand its territory in any sense. So this is something that he could potentially be remembered by, or a second four-year term could be remembered by in a couple of decades from now.
Daniela, let's turn to the issue of immigration. You've been tracking that very closely for Politico, some great reporting. What are you hearing about what the Trump team is going to do once they take office on this front? Is it just mass deportations and executive orders, or will there be a legislative component in January and February?
Well, I've been reporting on this extensively in the last, especially couple of days since things are starting to become cemented, plans are starting to happen. Now, important to remember when Stephen Miller was here last week, of course, one of the top aides to President-elect Donald Trump, he was telling senators in that private meeting last week that they plan to do, of course, policies that used to be in the Trump administration when he was president, remain in Mexico, Title 42, and of course, immediately reconstructing the border wall, starting that construction. So those are the things that we expect that will happen on day one. Of course, the other things are what they're trying to figure out. How many people will they be able to deport? What do the resources for that look like? Of course, that Laken-Riley Act legislation is moving through the Senate right now, could have additional amendments, considering Democrats want to see what they can do with that legislation that Trump will most likely pass, or sign into law. So that's really all of the things that are on the table right now. Of course, House Republicans really, really pushing H.R. 2, their monumental border security package that they passed last Congress, but of course was not taken up by the Democratic-led Senate. That legislation, of course, would is major immigration reform, stricter border security, stricter resources to the border to really change legal migration in the country. And so what we're seeing is them continue to work on that. But of course, lots of moving parts as they try to figure out what they can do. And of course, what they can put in that massive budget reconciliation bill, that tax package, energy package, immigration package that they're trying to pass by April, May, as Speaker Mike Johnson has said repeatedly.
And Daniela, a follow-up. You've been tracking Senator-elect Ruben Gallego of Arizona for Politico. What kind of role do you expect him to play with President Trump this year? Is he going to be someone who can work on a bipartisan deal? Is he going to be more of a frontline critic? What do you expect after your coverage of him?
When I see Senator Gallego, newly elected Senator Gallego, I see him as possibly being someone similar to Senator John Fetterman, someone who, of course, represents a state that Trump won in the 2024 election, and trying to be more of someone that could govern and be a bipartisan governor, considering, of course, he's filling the seat of Senator Kyrsten Sinema, an independent former Democrat who, of course, did not run for re-election. So we're seeing that he was the second Democrat to come forward on that Lake and Riley Act to sponsor that legislation. But not only that, he seems incredibly open to considering other measures on border security, on being a bipartisan member of the Senate. So it's really interesting to see that that's the role he's going to play. And of course, he's going to work as well with Senator Mark Kelly, his counterpart in Arizona, who also plays a similar role.
Daniela, you were exactly right. It is Senator Gallego. Of course, he's now in office. The last time I ran into him in Washington, he was still senator-elect, so that was still imprinted on my memory. But good catch, good correction. Meanwhile, when you look at the Senate, Graham, and you think about Greenland and all these other foreign policy and national security issues, what's the role of Senator Marco Rubio should he be confirmed as Secretary of State? Is he going to be someone who is cheerleading on policy for Trump's acquisition prospects when it comes to Greenland and the Panama Canal, or is he going to be a deferring voice based on your reporting?
Well, certainly he'll be somebody who attempts to build an intellectual framework around statements that could, at first glance, appear to be a whim. Greenland could be an example of that. I mean, Senator Rubio is unlikely to advocate military force, but he could say that Trump is really trying to say B when perhaps he's explicitly saying A. I think another thing that's worth keeping in mind is that Senator Rubio has a lot of experience with Western Hemisphere affairs. That's actually relatively unusual at the high level of the State Department in recent administrations. So when you look at Trump's most recent interests, be it Greenland or Panama, of course, his interest and experiences are unusually relevant in some respects.
And Daniela, just quickly here, what are you watching this week up on Capitol Hill?
Well, of course, Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing that's going to happen this time tomorrow. That's going to be the big news on Capitol Hill. That is going to be the first confirmation hearing we're going to see for all of Trump's nominees. That, of course, he's trying to get confirmed in his cabinet as soon as possible. We're expecting lots of pushback from Democrats, Republicans defending him because they don't want to see another Trump nominee drop out and withdraw their name from joining his cabinet. So that's going to be I expect it to be a fiery confirmation hearing in just a day tomorrow on Capitol Hill, and see what comes out of it now that he'll be on the main stage.
And quickly, what are you watching, Graham?
Well, I'd have to say that for me, what I'm watching, I'm really looking forward to next week because I think those are going to be the most exciting confirmation hearings. I'm particularly looking forward to Gabbard because I think that's the only one that the Trump team is genuinely unsure about.
Well, we'll be paying attention to all of that. Graham Slattery and Daniela Diaz, thank you for stopping by. And now with the GOP in control of Congress, how do House Democrats plan to navigate the 119th? We'll talk to a newly elected Democratic lawmaker from Virginia coming up next on America Decides. The majority of the Republican Party won in the House of Representatives has already narrowed and is expected to soon become even slimmer. 215 Democrats and 220 Republicans were elected or reelected to the House this fall, but only 219 Republicans are currently serving in the House after Congressman Matt Gaetz resigned in November. The GOP's majority will become even leaner once Representatives Elise Stefanik of New York, Mike Waltz, resigned to serve in President-elect Donald Trump's new administration. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Suhas Subramanian joins us now from Capitol Hill. He's a new member of Congress representing Virginia's 10th Congressional District. Congressman, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time. So Thank you. Congressman, you're in a state that has a Republican governor, but a lot of Democrats up in Northern Virginia and elsewhere. What's your plan, how you're going to navigate a Republican majority in Congress and a Republican president as a new member?
Look, I've always been bipartisan. I've always tried to work across the aisle. Republicans haven't indicated so far that they're serious about doing that. And so if they want to be historically unproductive, like they were in the 118th Congress, then they'll keep on doing that. If they want to actually be more productive, get things done for the American people, they'll work with Democrats like me. And so my door's open. I'm ready to work with them when they're ready.
How old are you, Congressman?
I'm 38.
And tell me a little bit about your district.
Yeah, I've got one of the best commutes in Congress. I'm about 40 minutes away in Northern Virginia. We've got a lot of federal workers in places like Loudoun County and Prince William County, and we want to make sure that, we protect them and protect our economy and protect the federal workforce because that's important to our economy.
And Congressman, when you think about the federal employees in your district, how do they look at Elon Musk and Doge and that whole effort to curtail the size and scope of the federal government?
Yeah, whether it's contractors or civil servants, if the idea is to make government more efficient and better and get more for our tax dollars, I think everyone's on board. I'm certainly on board, and that's work that I've done before. If the idea is to fire federal workers and replace them with Trump loyalists, or to move federal agencies for the sake of it at the cost of taxpayers, then that's the fight that I'm willing to bring on and have, because that's really bad for our country. It's really bad for our community.
What's the mood in your district, Congressman, about immigration and border security? You have the Lake and Riley Act that's being considered on Capitol Hill. Where do you land on that?
Yeah, I think in general, people want immigration reform, but that does not mean, mass deportations. That's certainly something I don't support. If an undocumented immigrant commits a crime, though, then that's something where we should consider whether they should remain in the country. I think that was what the Lake and Riley Act was about. We have a couple more votes this week about that. And so, there's going to be a vetting process as we look into giving undocumented folks a path to citizenship. But, certainly a mass deportation, I don't think that'll be taken too kindly, and it's, I don't think, very American either.
But it seems like it is coming, Congressman, the effort to have a mass deportation. So when that does play out, as we expect it to, what are House Democrats going to do? Is it going to be protest? Is it going to be, you can only do so much in the minority, but what is the plan?
Yeah, part of trying to do that, it's a very expensive undertaking. And so as we look into how we're spending money as a country, rather than a mass deportation, which not only is, tough for a lot of communities, it also raises costs. Republicans just campaigned on lowering costs, but a lot of undocumented workers work in fields. They pay tax money, and they also lower costs for a lot of businesses, and they pass that on to consumers. And so we're just going to point out how bad it is for the American people to do something like that.
Congressman, I'm 39 years old, and so I'm a seasoned Washington hand compared to the 38-year-old congressman. And
Sure.
We grew up with different social media when we were in college and we were in high school. Not everything was around, but now for the people 10, 15 years younger than us, TikTok is huge. But it now appears to be on track to be banned in the United States. As one of the younger members of Congress, where do you come down on TikTok?
Yeah, it's tough because I hate to ban a technology or social media like that. And in general, I know a lot of young folks who really, really like TikTok, and it's really well, received in the U.S. There are national security concerns, but I hope that they will be resolved. I hope that ByteDance, the parent company, will work with us on starting a U.S. subsidiary or selling it to a U.S. company, because I know a lot of people really like that product. So I hope that it will resolve itself, but there are a lot of national security concerns for sure.
Congressman, finally, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania has gotten a lot of attention for visiting President-elect Trump at Mar-a-Lago. If you got the invitation to meet with President-elect Trump or President Trump, would you take it?
I'll work with anyone to get things done, even President Trump. With that said, I don't necessarily think I need to go to Mar-a-Lago to meet with him. He wants to meet in D.C. I'm right here in the Capitol.
Congressman Suhas Subramanian, we really appreciate you stopping by and wish you the best of luck as you begin your congressional term.
Thank you so much.
First, he met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Now he's planning on voting for some of the president-elect's cabinet picks. So will other Democrats follow, as we just discussed? Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania in his lead. We'll have more on America Decides.
there's a lot of them I can say right now here on Fox, I'm going to vote for them. And there's others, but that we're going to go through the process. But I'm open to hear from everyone.
That was Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman. Says he plans on voting for some of President-elect Trump's picks for the cabinet. His fellow Democrats, though, are weighing how much they should push back when these confirmation hearings begin tomorrow. Reporter for Notice, Riley Rogerson, joins us now. Riley, great to have you here. You are a Pennsylvania native from Bucks County, the great Bucks County, my hometown area. When you look at Senator Fetterman's comments, are they indicative of what's happening across the landscape on Capitol Hill or not? I know you've spoken to a lot of lawmakers.
I would say he represents one end of a spectrum of where the Democratic senators are going to line up. He's told me that he plans to listen and weigh very carefully who he's going to support. On the other end, you have plenty of progressive Democrats who I would have a very hard time believing are going to be supporting some of these Trump nominees. And then there's everyone in the middle. Democrats just lost a huge election in a big way, and they're going to try to figure out how they can thread the needle on looking bipartisan and finding common ground while also being tough on Trump.
You've spent part of your career covering the Alaska delegation. That includes Senator Lisa Murkowski. How important is that centrist bloc of Republicans going to be in the coming weeks?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Senator Murkowski, she's one to watch in the hearings. She's on the HELP committee, so that will be where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is. She's someone who's very thoughtful. She's going to take her time. I think we'll see her support some of these nominees, but maybe not all of them. She's very important, but with a 53-vote majority, I believe it is in the Senate now for Republicans, she's also easily going to be outvoted. So we'll see how she comes into this. Senator Susan Collins also going to be critical.
So Matt Gaetz was originally nominated for Attorney General. Now it's Pam Bondi for AG, as we just saw on the screen. What are her chances based on your reporting?
They're definitely better than Congressman Matt Gaetz's chances. I was in the Senate, in the Senate subway when they announced that, and the response among senators was real panic. I think people didn't totally know how to respond to that. Pam Bondi is seen as more of a common sense choice. I think that moderates are much more likely to at least take her candidacy seriously.
What about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? He has taken some positions that some would call controversial over the years. He was nominated and stirred quite a fervor when his nomination was announced. Has that subsided in any way?
I think it depends what senator you're watching. If Senator John Fetterman does back, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that gives him some wiggle room. So I think it will really depend. I think a lot of senators are taking him seriously. One to watch there is Senator Bill Cassidy, who runs the HELP committee. So we'll see. I mean, I think his candidacy is very alive, given he's moving forward with a hearing.
When you spoke to Senator Booker and other top Democrats, they seem to not be taking this all or nothing approach to the nominations. Behind the scenes, why do you think that is?
I think, like I said, they just lost a big election. Democrats across the board, not just in the Senate, are really grappling with what their next move is. They're really pivoting messaging-wise towards talking about working class and middle class voters and how legislatively they can work with Republicans to get policies over the line that will benefit those people and bring them back into the Democratic fold. So it's tough to go, guns blazing into these hearings and come across antagonistic. But at the same time, they're Democrats. They're not going to necessarily just support these nominees just because.
Is there a chance any of these nominees get a unanimous vote, such as Senator Marco Rubio, or do you expect it to kind of play out naturally with a recorded vote and everybody they get marked down wherever they land?
I'd be surprised if we see anyone coming through unanimously. Senator Marco Rubio is very well respected in the Senate. We have some great reporting about how Democrats were really excited about his candidacy and were worried that the president-elect would go with someone more extreme. So I think there's a lot of positive reception to him, but I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine that every senator will back him. We haven't seen that in a long time.
Riley Rogerson from Notice and from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Thanks for stopping by. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.